Brad, I don't know about the older folks in your life, but my in-laws and my parents have gotten their first vaccination shot, which is fantastic, and I'm very excited about it. But in true son-in-law mode, I have been saying this thing that I think is hilarious, and they are very disturbed by it. Every time I see them, I'm like, because, we keep talking about, the second vaccination shot. When's your shot? How are you feeling? Are you excited to get that second shot? What are you going to do? This and that. And I'm always like, hooray, that second shot, a week or two after that, then you can go back to licking bus handles. This is so great. And they're every time, I think it's delightful to say, yeah, you can go back to licking bus handles. And they are of an age where it's like, what is our damn son-in-law do? Why is he talking about this? Stop mentioning bus handles. God. We've never licked bus handles. What are you talking about? What did our daughter marry?
Oh my gosh, that's delightful. Yeah, do they have a hard time with your sense of humor?
I think that I think they do. in the sense of, don't get me wrong, they are funny people. They are incredibly funny people. They have a great sense of humor. But I think also, although they've been in the U.S. now for 60 years, every once in a while I will throw a joke out where you can see across their face that they're like, I'm not quite sure that I know the English. Is this some weird aphorism that I've never heard about licking bus handles? Or is it my damn son-in-law who is weird talking about we've gotten vaccinated and now we can lick bus handles? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Because idioms are really difficult when you go across cultures and language. Idioms is the first thing that really trips people up.
Oh, and absolutely. And even though they've been here 60 years, there's weird Englishisms that you could throw out at somebody that you're like, I have never heard. It takes 2 geese to get a gander, or whatever stupid phrase you could pick in the English language, like loaded for bear. Here we are.
Right.
I'm English is my first language. I have never heard loaded for bear, and yet you drop that one all the time. So anyway, I think a part of it, you can see the flicker across their face. Where like, okay, their options are A, my son-in-law is weird as hell, or B, there's some weird Englishism about, well, you've been vaccinated, so now you can lick a bus handle, and I just didn't happen to know it.
Well, listen, I've got news for you too. My parents just got their first vaccination shot, and I'm over the moon about it. We always joke about my dad being the mayor of Bad Axe, Michigan, because he knows everybody, right?
He probably coached half of them, right?
He really did. And so he's been, and out of both of them, they're both in their 80s, he's really taken to the computer a little bit because it's helped him to coach his bowling team, the high school bowling team. So he's really taken to it. Well, he's been on it. Like he knows all the different places that it might be coming into the county. He's on the phone.
Yep.
He gets on the phone yesterday. He says, Brad, we got our shots. I said, oh my gosh, you've been working on that for weeks now. How did you finally do it? He said, I heard they were coming into the Walgreens and I called over, and he says, well, I know the girl, so she got us in.
Susie, I says to Susie, it's Mr. Geiger. How you doing?
Literally, that's how these conversations go. He knows everybody. Now, of course, as my wife quickly points out, he's also in his 80s and is probably on the short list anyway, but he was very proud that he got Mother and him in to get their vaccination using his personal connections.
Yeah. Isn't it weird it's one of those weird things about anxiety is that you don't realize how bad it was until the weight gets lifted. And once both sets of parents on our side got vaccinated, this weight came off my chest. And I was like, oh, shit, have I been carrying that around for a year, worrying about them? I guess I have. And but I want to build off what you were saying about your dad signing up, because my in-laws they're tech savvy, but not as tech savvy, unfortunately, as you need to be in Los Angeles at this moment to get the vaccination. It's like the Hunger Games over here. You know what it's more like? It's more like trying to buy concert tickets in the 90s when they release, when Ticketmaster would, all right, we're dropping another 1,000 tickets, and you'd have to call and have 5 friends online and do this and that. So I literally, Brad, I had installed Firefox, which I don't normally use, on my laptop so that I could have Chrome, Safari, and Firefox all loaded up and them logged in on the city of Los Angeles, the county of Los Angeles, and the state of California. And by God, it took me the better part of 3 days to get them an appointment.
Yeah.
But their son-in-law was on the job. I was like, if I'm going to make jokes about bus handles, I'm going to get them vaccinated.
Exactly. Whatever gets the job done.
And so on that note, I'm going to say hello, everybody, and welcome to ComicLab, the show about making comics.
And making a living from comics. I'm Brad Geiger, editor of webcomics.com and cartoonist of Evil Inc.
And I'm his pal Dave Kellett, cartoonist of Drive and Sheldon and co-director of Stripped.
And this week's Hour of Comics Advice is made possible by your support at patreon.com/comiclab. So Dave, let's talk comics.
Let's talk comics, my friend, and let's welcome on board a new sponsor for ComicLab this week. Friends of ours, in the sense that we use them week in and week out in our own career.
Yeah.
Bonjoro.com, BONJORO.com. A fantastic platform that I think, Brad, we've been using now for about 2 years or so. Gosh, it's funny how time flies in the pandemic. I genuinely don't know if it's 2 or 3 years. Bonjoro is an incredible service, and if you have joined us on Patreon or have bought, say, a book of mine or original art of mine or sometimes even a Kickstarter of mine, you get a personalized message. So I would hit record I'll get a notice on my phone that says, hey, Brad Geiger has bought a book. So I will hit my button on Bonjoro, and I can immediately record in my studio a quick video that says, oh my God, Brad, I saw that you just picked up my Drive book. That's fantastic. That means the world to me as a cartoonist. Thank you so much for the support. The book is winging out its way to you tomorrow. I hope you enjoy it, and thanks for the support. And then at the end of the message, Brad, I can even append a little discount code to upsell you so that you could get something else if you've already bought, right? So everyone that's joined us on Patreon on ComicLab has seen us send them a Bonjoro. And right now, Bonjoro has a special offer for ComicLab listeners.
Absolutely. This is going to be something you're really going to want to check out. Bonjoro is kindly offering ComicLab folks 20% off Bonjoro for life.
For life. Not this week, not next month, for life.
Yeah. So here's what happens. You can go and sign up for a 14-day free trial for Bonjoro. So you've got no commitment. You can try it out, see how you like it.
Right.
After that trial is up and it's time to seal the deal, look for the coupon code. Look for the coupon field and enter ComicLab March. It's all one word, ComicLab March. That code expires March 31st, so make sure you jump on it right now, and you can have 20% off Bonjoro for life.
For life. That's pretty sweet. And I should note that this applies only to new customers, the ComicLab March code. Coupon code, and there's only a maximum of one redemption per customer. But I got to tell you, as I love the fact that we're able to have a sponsor that we use and love in our own business, because it makes it so easy to sing their praises. I have genuinely seen how this has made an impact in my cartooning. So try out the 14-day trial period over at Bonjoro, BONJORO.com.
Yeah, that's going to be the first thing when you sign up. That's going to be the first thing you really notice is the amazed response you get from the people you're sending messages out to. The fact that you calling them by name and you're speaking directly to them, I cannot overspeak the impact that has.
It's kind of like that old Dale Carnegie thing that nothing sounds as sweet as your own name to someone, like in terms of salesmanship. But me literally recording a video, not some pre-recorded or templated thing that I send out saying, thank you for buying a book, but saying, Brad, thank you for buying a book. And it's really impactful.
Yeah, you are going to be amazed when you sign up at the effectiveness of this. And I think you're going to turn things like Patreon backers and Kickstarter backers into people that are going to come back year after year after year because they feel connected to you now. And it's something that I've seen happen on a very real basis. All of a sudden, these folks feel like they've got a personal connection to you, and that is going to keep them around for a long time.
Exactly. And so that's why it's one of those things that it's easy for us to say, try out the 14-day free trial period, because we have used and loved it now for years. So BONJORO.com. And Brad, that brings us to our first question coming in from Raj Solanki over at patreon.com/ComicLab. And Raj writes, hi, Dave and Brad. I was wondering if you had any resource recommendations for someone wanting to learn about the history of comics. Thanks a bunch for all you do. P.S. Dave successfully convinced me to add boxer briefs to the repertoire. So you're changing lives in more ways than just comics. Well, Raj, I'm so glad to have helped out you and I guess all your private bits with the boxer briefs. That's fantastic.
Boy, isn't Bonjoro happy they're sponsoring this one?
So like,
they
oh
get
boy,
to hear about boxer briefs right off the bat.
We jumped in at the right time, I guess.
Yeah.
Well, Brad, both services are supportive, both Bonjoro and the boxer briefs.
That's right. That's right. Listen, this is a great topic because there's a couple a couple of books that I absolutely pored over, and I very rarely like go back and read the same book again. There's a couple here that I actually have on repeat, either like on an audio book that I play in the studio or a great audio book for a road trip. But I don't think that there's one that does as good of a job anywhere as this one that I'm going to put on the top of the list. And that's The 10-Cent Plague by David Hadid. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
10-Cent. Yeah. 10-Cent Plague it focuses on this period of time when comics were seen as being bad for juveniles. They were leading to juvenile delinquency. There was a bunch of comics burnings that were organized by church groups and so forth. And there was actually Senate hearing. Was that the Kefauver committee? Am I remembering that right?
You know what? I genuinely don't remember the name of the committee. I'm sorry about that.
Estes Kefauver. And anyway,
Kefauver sounds like a bit from like a Lucille Ball sketch. Mr. Kefauver here to see you. Mr. Kefauver.
Yes, Mrs. Kefauver.
Mrs. Ricardo.
Hello. But it hangs on these Senate hearings on how. And by the way, listen. It led to the Comics Code, which led to a very tepid period of storytelling in United States comic books. But if you look back at some of the old horror comics
right before
and
the
some
code,
of the stuff, pre-code comics, there was some stuff that went a little far, got a little bit gruesome and grotesque. You could kind of see why some people were upset. But in setting all of this up, the 10-Cent Plague goes through to the very beginning of comics history where, in case you don't know it, the way comic books started was they took comic strips and printed them into like newspaper supplements, like little booklets that they slid in with the newspaper.
Right.
And people went and so they would take those, put them on the newsstands and sell them separately.
Yep.
They sold like hotcakes. They couldn't keep them in the newsstands. They realized they had something going, so they kept doing it. And then very quickly, this idea of instead of doing old comic strips that had already run in the newspaper, they took and started creating some new stuff just for these little publications.
Because the money was there.
All of a sudden, an industry was born. Yeah. Well, he goes to the very beginning of all of that. He even goes so far as to talk about people like Major Wheeler Nicholson, who was at the very beginning of comics history, who was, by the way, Dave, for those, because I know you're a big fan like I am of the Fletch movie franchise starring.
Oh my God, I haven't thought about that in forever.
Chase. Was it the first? It was the first Fletch movie. Dana Wheeler Nicholson played his love interest. And she was like the granddaughter of Major Wheeler Nicholson, who was at the very forefront of comics. So that's kind of a nice little connection for you there. So yeah, this 10-Cent Plague, this is number one on my list of books that I would recommend that really does a deep dive on comics history, but it's mostly comic book history.
Right. But I think, though, just to reiterate how important and crucial this time period is for comics, To Brad's point, you had all these really interesting comics that then became very tepid after the code got introduced. But what it also did is it winnowed down the field that comics could be, because at the same time, television was coming in. So we lost all the Western comics. Those all went to TV. At the same time, sci-fi started, both in terms of novelizations and on TV, came in. So we kind of lost a little bit. So basically, comics in America became superhero comics. And unlike the Japanese, where comics became everything, they became instruction manuals, they became romance books, they became, travel logs. Like you look at what manga is now, we're only now catching up to what manga is. Because the code ruined it all for us, basically. And then also there's an argument to be made that American pulp sci-fi got a boost because all those writers that were working for comics were like, well, I can't write what I want to write for comics anymore. I'll go write 10-cent sci-fi novelettes and that kind of thing. And so that whole market took off. And then it also, it refocused the efforts so that basically what you were left with was New Yorker and Saturday Evening Post type cartooning, comic strip cartooning, superhero cartooning, which was the only comic book left, and then editorial cartooning. And that was kind of, it basically changed the course of what North America, even though Canada was separate, it changed the course of what North American comics for the next 70 years, when it happened.
Absolutely.
So that's a really great book. Two other books that I would recommend, Raj, that are sort of survey books of comics in the 20th century. They are not a history per se, but they are survey books. But I got to tell you, as a way of glancing through what's come before, they're very interesting. One is Comics, The Complete Collection by Brian Walker. Brian Walker, of course, is the son of Mort Walker. If I remember correctly, it's about a 300-page book. I have it up on my shelf, and you could definitely kill a man with it. It's a huge book. And then a very similar but slimmer version of that same kind of idea is Maurice Horn wrote a book called 100 Years of American Newspaper Comics. I recommend that one a lot. And then in general, I will say, and I'm not tooting my own horn here, but the extraneous content from my documentary Stripped, we did 300 hours of documentary interviews, and we've made about 75 hours of that available, like lightly edited, only for ums and ahs and coughs and stuff. But you can watch 75 hours while you're cartooning of cartoonists talking about their own history, their own shop talk, their own perception of how comics have moved and changed in American history. And so I think that's been a nice resource for folks wanting to learn about the history.
Absolutely. Couple more I want to put on your list. The Geiger family listened to this one as an audio book on a road trip down to Florida to go to Disney World, and I'm telling you, it made the miles fly by. Marvel Comics: The Untold Story by Sean Howes. Fantastic look at Marvel Comics from the very beginning all the way through like the 80s and the 90s, and stories, a lot of stuff that as a comics fan, I did not know, didn't have an idea of. Some stuff like, Stan and Jack starting a Marvel Comics with the Fantastic Four, we've all kind of heard quite a bit. But there was some other stories that were just amazing. Goes into that whole, Image Comics walking out of Marvel Comics. Create Image Comics. And I think Image Comics just today announced an anniversary. They just hit another milestone as a publisher. So that's a really good one. And also check out Slugfest: Inside the Epic 50-Year Battle Between Marvel and DC. That's by Reed Tucker. Another great book.
And one other one that I would add to that list, former head editor of DC Comics, Paul Levitz, wrote a book called 75 Years of DC Comics. There's a subtitle that I don't remember, but it's the basic idea is 75 years. Big yellow book, gorgeously put together. And I would recommend that one. But in general, it's a fun field to start reading up on, because there's a few key autobiographies and biographies too that can help you. But I think the books that Brad and I roughly laid out there will give you the general history of 20th century comics, especially in America. If you notice, we don't really talk about histories of bande dessinée or magazines or that exist in Europe. And it's frankly just because we ourselves are not authoritatively aware of the greatest books to turn to there. But anyway, I think the list that we have put out is a pretty good start for you, Raj.
Yeah, that'll get you reading, and definitely let us know what you think. Let us know if there's some others that we should know about that we can add to our list. Meanwhile, we're going to turn to another $5 Patreon question, Dave.
Can I add a funny addendum to that, Brad? And let us know if there's a book that we can add to our list so that Dave can buy it, put it on his shelf, and never read it, which is what tends to happen with 90% of the books I buy these days.
Dave, we got that picture when you said, "Oh, that was a very good book. It had a yellow cover."
Oh, I remember. Really nice matte printing. I'll remember the feel of that till I die. That was it just felt awesome. And I love that the other description was, "Oh yeah, you could kill a man with this book." You're right. Have I ever read a book, Brad? Maybe I've never read a book.
Well, listen, we're going to get you off the hook of the book and come around to a little humor writing. J. Lark writes, I think it would be fun to hear about a time when inspiration for a joke or a story idea came from an unexpected or unusual source. What was the circumstance? How did you capture the idea? And how did it evolve into its final form? So, Dave, I ask you, have you ever had a joke come at you from a weird or unexpected place?
Oh yeah, and it's frankly sometimes it feels like a gift from on high because you can have those sessions, Brad, where you're sitting there on coffee number 9 and you're like, please have a joke, please have a joke, please have an idea, and you've been sitting for 4 hours with a blank sheet of paper in front of you and a pencil and you're kind of staring in the middle distance, and then sometimes you'll be at the mall or taking a dog for a walk or dropping the kids off for school and something will just spark and you'll be like, whoa, where did that come from? What a weird source that was a great fully formed joke. I will say this. Most of my joke writing comes from situations in my life. I will be talking to someone, something will be happening while I'm out with somebody, and I'll say, hold on one second, I just got to jot down an idea, right? That happens to me a lot. And the people that are in my life, I'm sure, Brad, with you, the same thing happens where you'll go to your boys, hey, hold on, I've just got to write an idea down on my phone real quick, or I've just got to jot this idea down in a notebook. And so that happens to me a lot, both in terms of conversation and in situational awareness kind of a thing. What's funny for me is when it happens, when something communally happens and it's 4 or 5 cartoonists all standing together. Yeah. Because if no one was the clear generator of what just happened, I remember specifically, we were in a lobby, Brad, of a hotel in Baltimore. It was you, myself, Chris Straub, Scott Kurtz, sitting around laughing in a lobby, and something happened, and it was incredibly funny to the point we were all crying with laughter. And then there was a beat, and then we all kind of made eye contact, like, okay, who gets it? Who gets to claim?
Yeah, and we had to work out a system very quickly because Dibs was not going to do it. You know, it was going to have to be something other than Dibs.
But it was like a custody fight. It was like we were going to get to, who gets to claim the kid?
Yeah, all of a sudden it was like, okay, and after a little while, after we got to know each other a lot better, it kind of became natural because it was like, oh, you know what? That's a Scott joke, or that's a Dave joke.
Yeah, that Chris could work that into one of his. Oh, this one feels like a Brad one, that kind of thing. Yeah. But it is funny among cartoonists also. I have seen this happen where I will come back from Emerald City Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con a week later, right? And I'll be reading friends' comics online, and I will see slightly different iterations of the same kind of concept from a joke that we had all been making that weekend, right? And it's delightful because we all write what we know and we write what we experience. For me, though, one that oh, you know what? By the way, I'm talking too much. You go ahead. What are ideas that have come to you? Well, it's also I realize that I'm on like coffee number 88 this morning, and so
you're
I'm fully
wound
charged.
Up today. I can tell you're wound up. No, mine is very different. Mine comes from 2 inabilities, right? Number 1, sometimes my hearing ain't so great, and my typing is horrible. And often when I mishear or I mistype something, the mistake is often very funny and leads to really great things. So I'll hear something wrong and it's like, oh my God, that's pretty funny. This happened just the other day. I was writing out a tweet and I was posting a comic, and you try to have a little something clever to go with the comic. So I'm writing about it, and the whole concept was that a werewolf was using hair coloring to look younger.
Okay.
And So, and the name of the hair coloring, the most popular hair coloring brand is Just for Men. And I had mistyped it as Just for Men, F-U-R. Just for Men. And I said, oh my God, I couldn't have written that. And that's the perfect name for a hair coloring product that werewolves would use. Just for Men.
That's amazing. It's funny how many jokes are just taking life and going, just making it a little bit askew. It's 99% of the jokes in Family Circus, if you think about it. It's how kids or also, with Bill Cosby's old show of Kids Say the Darndest Things, just that idea that if you take a truth and put it 99% on an angle, that it's close, but it's like just far enough to be humorous. But that's interesting. I'm also curious, Brad, with your hearing being, because one of your ears, I don't know if folks know this, one of your ears is a little bit hard of hearing, right? Is it deaf or hard of hearing? What's the better way to describe it?
It's 75% dead. I mean, 75% complete hearing loss on the left side.
Now, can I ask you, is that when, as a boy, you went to the pharmacist and tried to tell him that he had put the wrong pills in the carton and he slapped you on the ear? Or is this when you were trying to save your brother when he fell into the ice? Is it... Do you remember what I'm referring to in It's a Wonderful Life when he lost the hearing in his ear?
No, you know what? I've never watched that movie all the way through.
What? I will murder you. You've never watched It's a Wonderful Life?
No.
I've never had such a visceral reaction to you. You've never watched It's a Wonderful Life?
Oh my God. Now I know this is what it's like when this conversation was reversed with The Godfather. No, I've never watched it.
Because you're always trying to get me to watch Glengarry Glen Ross, which I've never watched.
Yes.
Oh, Brad, It's a Wonderful Life is an American treasure. I cry every time I watch that film. It's a
Wonderful Life. It's a Wonderful Life was a box office bomb. Nobody liked it until all of a sudden the whole idea of playing movies on TV and syndicated reruns came about. And they played it on Christmas and everybody fell in love with it.
And do you know why they played it on Christmas? This is a wonderful story for artists. They played it on Christmas because it accidentally fell out of copyright. So everybody could play it basically for free. And so something about the filing of it, I forget the details, but basically It's a Wonderful Life is out of copyright. So much like a lot of art that gets played all the time, it's because it was free. The TV stations were like, shit, play that thing 5 times before Christmas. I don't care. Just keep running it.
Back to back.
It's pure profit when we play that thing. Also, it's funny because I could go on too much about that film, but you got to watch it, especially around Thanksgiving. Watching it at Thanksgiving in anticipation of Christmas, great time of year to watch it. It's a great one. Brad. Anyway, so you're hard of hearing in one ear, and I have to say right now, you currently have a tucked-in headphone only in one of your ears, not the other one. Yeah. And I just realized that represents you can have 50% savings anytime you buy headphones.
Yes, I can make them last twice as long. I only use them one at a time.
Do you know how tough it is? You get twice the life out of it. All right, keep going.
Yeah. Do you know how tough it is to go into a store and ask to buy one ear pod or one iPod? They look at you really strange.
You're like that guy, you always see him at a supermarket who's separating out one banana. I just want one banana from the bunch. Like, sir, I just want to buy the one banana, thank you. Brad's over in Best Buy going, I'll just have the one headphone, please. I don't need the set. I've been Brad Geiger.
What do you need all these headphones for?
You kids with your fancy 2 headphones, I only need one. So anyway, the only other exception that I can think of where something caught me out of left field was, you know how things are funnier when you're not supposed to laugh? For example, like at a funeral.
Yeah, like at a funeral.
If something strikes you as funny, also because you need the emotional release valve, but I remember very specifically that I got a week's worth of Star Wars comic strips out of going to church one time because the priest 1,000% sounded like Emperor Palpatine, and the whole time I'm trying to keep it together, but he sounds like, you're foolish to have faith in your friends, kind of a thing. Like, I'm like, literally, Emperor Palpatine is up there He kept saying the word Paracenter, and to me it sounded like prepared for this fully operational Paracenter because they had just built the Paracenter. Anyway, the fact that this priest sounded like Emperor Palpatine, I could not keep it together. It was so hard to not laugh, but it produced a week's worth of jokes on Star Wars because, what are you going to do? You're going to write while you're sitting there, and so what an idea generator that was.
Oh my God. And while you were talking about that, I just had one of these days when we finally get around to writing our sitcom about a cartoonist who goes through life. We got to have one episode where the person's got writer's block so bad that they start looking for funerals to go to. Isn't that that's a great episode idea? I've got to find a funeral, because they're planning and playing on that idea of having that trapped laughter.
I don't know if you guys did this as a couple, but another situation where you're not supposed to laugh, but it's the same kind of situation as church where you're stuck in a room, supposed to be serious, was Glow and I did kind of Lamaze classes. Oh my God, you got me. I did not expect that.
You're trapped in the room. Yes, go on.
No, it's four. I actually was referring to 4 months later. We were in Lamaze class. And that situation of being in Lamaze class, because you always kind of get the hippy dippy Lamaze teacher, like, breathe the baby, welcome the baby into the world. And it's always a woman that wants to be paid in a flower. It's always, it's a weird sort of 70s holdover type personality. It's like, no, you know what? Love and joy. But in Lamaze class, you're stuck with these people that you don't normally know. And you're all doing these weird breathing, kind of like, ape-like sounds. And then you're trying to be serious about it. And as a cartoonist, I wrote some amazing material in Lamaze class. I remember that whole period of like, I'm going to write because this next hour is going to be ridiculous.
Now, if you're listening at home and you've got a wife that's pregnant and you're thinking, that this is something that might apply to your life, I want to this is our Goofus and Gallant moment because Dave did it right. Dave looked at that and said, I'm going to write. I, in that same exact situation, said, I'm going to speak. And my wife there's very few things that make my wife really upset. But when we labor classes, those Lamaze classes, she always looks at me and she says, you had to be the funny one. And
Captain Entertaining couldn't shut up.
Yeah. I can't remember what I said. It couldn't have been that funny, although I did have a whole bunch of pregnancy jokes in Greystone Inn, so maybe I can go back and look. But evidently, I must have made some comments that were it went over like a fart in church, and she's one of the few things she really gets mad at me about.
I gotta say though, those moments where constraint, it actually is one of the reasons why I think comic strips work as a writing format is constraint actually lends itself to a writing process. So when you are in a situation where you cannot laugh or you're not supposed to laugh or seriousness is the prerequisite, it's actually a great moment to write because everything in you wants to break out of that. So instead, in your mind's eye, channel that into writing, And so those were great opportunities for writing in my pregnancy days with my wife. Is like, oh God. Also, it being LA, we were stuck in the room with the biggest weirdos. It's always Los Angeles produces some weirdos.
It's a comedy perfect storm. You're stuck in the room. There's a character standing in front of you, and you're a little nervous. And that also goes into the whole thing, too.
Yes,
You're a little
absolutely. Nervous energy also is a great writer. Yeah. So as you're sitting there trying to listen to Moondragon talking about your breathing techniques or whatever the person's name was, and, they're trying to have you center yourself with the energy that Saturn is putting out or whatever the tone of the moment was. It's a great time to write. I loved it. Hey, if you're listening while you work, take a minute to stand and stretch.
And while you're doing that, we're going to tell you why you should join us on Patreon.
When you do, you're going to get hours and hours of podcasts that we recorded just for backers.
And exclusive Patreon posts that go even deeper on ComicLab topics.
And access to our exclusive Discord server, which is a thriving community of professional cartoonists.
So you can support the show you love and get tons of actionable resources for your own cartooning.
And listen, if you can't swing a pledge this month, we get it.
no worries.
Yeah, listen, you can still support the show by rating us wherever you get your podcasts.
Just leave a 5-star review and a few kind words.
That, along with mentions on social media, is incredibly helpful.
Now, everybody, let's talk comics.
Okay, Brad, well, our next question comes in from Scott Beezer over at patreon.com/ComicLab. And Scott writes, 2 of the webcomics I follow, Evil Inc. and Spinneret, have After Dark versions where their characters are put into very not suitable for work adventures. And I've been pondering doing a not suitable for work spinoff of my own comic because poverty sucks. Problem is, some of my characters are modeled on friends of mine. Yikes. And aside from that, my business partner who built and runs the website has said if I do this, I'm, quote, on my own. So as an alternative, I've considered doing a spin-off in the same setting with different characters on a different website. Do you think this is viable in terms of marketing? Well, Bradley, I'm going to turn this over to you with the caveat that I see like 2 or 3 red flags in this question. But go ahead. I want to hear what your response is.
There's a lot of stuff here that needs to be unpacked. Number one, let's begin with poverty sucks. It's one of the things that really kind of disappoint me when people talk about not safe for work, because the conception is, well, it's really easy. You draw naked people having sex and the money comes rolling in, and that's. The more I've done not safe for work, the more I have a real respect and admiration for it. As weird as that may sound to you, it's not easy to do this kind of storytelling, and you can prove that. You can prove that to yourself very easily by taking a look at a great number of people who are trying it and failing miserably. Because number one, you've got to be able to draw your butt off to be able to do this. You've got to really be able to, I had to really up my game in order to pull this off. Number two, you've got to be a really good storyteller, because the mechanics of sex get kind of redundant after a little while, right? In fact, really, if you really want to get down to it, this is a lot more about romance writing than it is about erotica, because the mechanics of sex are not nearly as interesting as why the people are there in the first place.
The relationships that build up to it. Yeah, I mean, my attitude on that is people are like, well, it's instant cash is kind of to paraphrase Shakespeare with Hamlet. There are more ways to fail, Horatio, than are dreamt of in your philosophy. You can mess this up so many different ways. And I agree with you, Brad, on that. And frankly, just in general, to people, regardless of this specific question and this specific angle, we have all done certain arts or taken on certain projects or done freelance work or created a book because you needed a little income. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm doing this because I have to work, and this supports my other things, or this will make it possible for me to continue to be a cartoonist. That's fine.
Yeah.
But I just want to put a little flag on that phrase, because poverty sucks, because it's tricky if that becomes your default position with all of your art, I guess is one way of saying it. Like, there's not an artist alive that didn't at some point have to do something that they didn't want to do, whether it's Picasso or even Shakespeare, who I just quoted. Lord knows, Shakespeare, he might not have wanted to write Macbeth with those witches, but you know what? There's a new Scottish king, and he happens to like the occult. So guess what? Macbeth is going to have some witches in it.
Exactly.
But anyway, so everybody's had to make certain accommodations for the reality of making art. I get that, but I want to put a line in the sand and say, just be careful that doesn't become your default for every art. I mean, you ultimately want to write the things you want to write because they are true to you and have meaning to you, and hopefully will resonate with the world.
Right. Well, go back a couple of 2-3 shows. Go back to the episode called Creative Motivation that went out just a little while ago. We talk about a guy that did exactly that. Remember, Dave? I did this, and then that wasn't making money, and I did that. And then that wasn't making money, and I did that. All of the creative decisions were based on what he thought was going to get him rich quick. Right. I can't encourage you strongly enough. Number one, because again, like Dave says, there's 100 ways to fail. Number two, because doing this, it takes a big commitment. It takes a big requirement to become sensitive to some topics like we've talked about before, consent being prime among them. This is a big responsibility you're taking on. If you're just doing it because you think it's a quick cash grab, you're going to find yourself in situations that you're not prepared for. So right off the bat, I want to encourage you to think this all the way through.
And just to counterbalance that thought, so we're clear, it's not that Brad and I are anti-careerists in terms of making a career out of art. If anything, this show is evidence to the fact that we want people to make a career out of their art. But there is a strength, as Brad is saying, to having passion behind what you're doing that will carry you through the low moments, that will carry you through when you're sick, but you have to draw. And there's something different about that than doing it purely for cash reasons, purely because it's the paycheck. So just be careful. And then I think the next red flag that I want to talk about is a comic that includes friends and why we've talked even outside of a not suitable for work setting. We've talked about how that can be a trip line sometimes.
Listen, it's too late. Scott's already done this. It's too late to tell him not to do this. But if you're listening at home and you're considering basing your comic on your friends, because it would be a real hoot. We've talked time after time after time. Do not do this. It's always a trap. It's always a loser. It's always trouble waiting to happen. By the way, you can base your comic or certain aspects of the comic on your friends or things you do.
Absolutely, you can base it. Yes.
You never tell them about it.
No.
You never say anything about it.
Complete deniability that character is them when they ask, right?
Yes.
You're like, no, that character has red hair. You have brown hair.
You're completely different.
That's you.
You're special.
Yeah.
But you never, it's too late for Scott, but don't do this. It's a big loser. But now he's already down this road, so he's got to consider how to do it. And we're going to get to that in a minute, because I do have some thoughts. Actually, I've got a couple thoughts on this, but the next red flag is this one. My business partner says that if I do this thing, I'm on my own. The business partner runs and built the website. Time to find a new business partner, number one, because if all this business partner does is build and run the website, it's not that hard to build and run a website, and you're letting this person make creative decisions on your behalf because you created a website. Listen, you check out toocheke.com, TOOCHEKE.com. It's the best comics CMS system out there. If you have trouble, drop Brian a line. Brian will get you squared away, or put a couple dollars out and get somebody with somebody in college looking to make a quick buck. They can build this website in an afternoon, and then you get to make all of your own business decisions without somebody moralizing on the side. Go ahead. What do you think about that?
Well, I want to argue to the flip side of that, which is like, let's assume that this partnership was started in all good faith, and I'm sure it was, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you and I are doing a project, Brad.
Yeah.
One of the reasons why we say contractualize it once you start getting into business things is that what might have happened is you assumed that this was a possibility that could go this route. The other person assumed that absolutely was not a route that could be gone into.
Yep.
And so if you have not contractualized it, then basically you are winging it in terms of like where the realm of what could happen in this comic, what the outer limits of it might be, right? Like I could see if Brad was like, "Hey, Dave, that project that we're doing now, it's going to be not suitable for work." I could very well be see myself going, "Oh, Brad, that's not really what I want to do. We didn't really talk about it that way." And Brad's like, "No, right here in the contract, Dave, we signed that it could be this." I was like, "Oh, I guess we did." Right. So what I'm saying is like, even people of good faith that go into a business arrangement with assumptions, you have to clarify the range of what might be produced. You have to clarify the out for one another. So if someone's not happy with the way things are going, how they duck out. Contracts are basically anticipatory agreements of what can happen when things go wrong and what can happen when things go right. And it's basically, if you want to think about it, a conversation written down about the future. And so contractualizing it with your business partner in this sense would have been both edifying and clarifying in terms of how this could have netted out with changes in what was being produced.
Right. Well, my only point there is that this person had been better do more than just build and run the website if this person wants to make this level of decision making in the comic. I wouldn't listen. I have great respect for people that do that, but somebody that sets up my website is never ever going to tell me how to do Evil Inc.
Agreed. I agree. I want to counterpoint. I don't know why I'm counterpointing all this, but I just, for context, like in TV where my wife works, you have these things called non-writing producers. And they do have some creative input, even though they work on all the non-creative things generally, right? They tend to do the business. I don't know how they've set up their business. Maybe these two bounce ideas off each other, even though they one runs the website and one does the cartooning. Maybe the other one handles the money so well that the other one has to chime in on creative decisions with them because they're, adrift at sea if they don't have the other one. Who knows what the full relationship is? I don't want to say, but I can see a reason why. Even if they're two friends that developed into business partners, why creatively they would go back and forth, right? It's within the realm of possibility.
That's fair. So let's get down to the real problem here. Scott says what he wants to do is do a spin-off in the same setting with different characters on a completely different website. Do I think this is viable? Well, viable, yes. In that anything is viable, right? You could pull anything off if you find the right touch. I think you're giving up huge opportunities because what we've seen, and again, with my comic and Spinneret and a lot of other comics out there that have done this, is you do your PG-13 comic as a loss leader, frankly, as something to get people in the door. And then you say, oh, we've got this other thing. Some of the stories offshoot and go over to the After Dark side. You join on Patreon and you get to check that stuff out. It's a wonderful way of taking, number one, of increasing your storytelling ability, because there are some tangents that I probably wouldn't go down that road otherwise. So you can kind of take this and say, okay, here's a thread we're going to pick up over there. It'll be continued over there. Meanwhile, here on the main Evil Inc. site, we're going to keep going with the current storyline without, stopping to look down that road.
Right.
It's really effective. It's super effective. Also, because remember, like I said at the very top of this topic, what really makes the eroticism, what really makes the sex sizzle, isn't the mechanics, it's the relationship. And that's what's going on in your main comic.
Right.
That's setting up all that stuff that happens in After Dark. So the relationships that are happening, all that other stuff creates the reason for all of the other stuff to happen. Does that make sense? You're giving it meaning.
Yeah, no, it's like anything in life. You can have it becomes illustrative if it doesn't have the emotion behind it. Then it's just an illustration. You know what I mean? And so, like any human activity, it's the relationships that matter. It's what led humans to make their uniquely human moves that make it interesting. So I get that. I would actually like to get down to brass tacks. What is your advice for now that we've identified the 3 red flags for us in terms of doing it for money, involving friends, not having clarified with the business partner where or how things might change? What would you advise Scott to do in this situation?
Well, listen, you've got to kind of play the hand you're given. You can do this. You can set it up. Putting it on another website is not a problem because you're probably going to put it on Patreon and that'll be your other website. Or you can, set up a different place to send people to and do it as a subscription basis. If you do that, though, these characters you create have now got to become part of your central world. They just can't be like introduced and then put off to the side, or worse yet, never appear in the central comic. Mm-hmm. They've got to become part of that central universe. And then they're the only ones that go over to the After Dark side, and that's fine. But again, remember, they've got to become part of that central storytelling because that's what's going to give the importance and the meaning to the stuff that happens on the After Dark side.
Okay, well, can I chime in with my brass tacks advice? Because I think mine is different than yours, although we're on the same page. Mine is to me, the giveaway here is that the phrase "poverty sucks," which tells me that the main comic is not producing income and/or is not generating enough spark with an audience, right?
Right.
And so, if you cook a hamburger and no one really wants that hamburger because it's not really well put together or it doesn't taste right, you going, now it's got chocolate sauce on it. Isn't that better, everybody? Now look at everybody likes chocolate, right? Look, I've put chocolate sauce all over that. I guess what I'm saying is I wonder, and I don't know what the title is here, but I wonder if maybe it's trying to put lipstick on a pig in the sense of like, if the comic is not working, trying to bring it into another venue that it has a perceived instantaneous riches to it, which is also not true, as Brad pointed out. But trying to do that maybe is not the right step here. Maybe it's worth starting a second title and experiment with maybe a new spark that will spark with an audience.
Well, absolutely. In other words, take lemons and make them lemonade. Maybe this is not a challenge so much as it's an opportunity to take this and create an entirely different thing that you start to build out the way that you want to do it in the first place. You know what I mean? Take this as an opportunity to create something new, is what you're saying.
And to build it from a better foundation. One, to Brad and I, as we were saying, build it from a passion, something you really want to write about, not something you think you have to write about, or that the quote unquote the public will like. Secondly, don't include friends for 1,000 reasons that we've talked about in the past, which is a 20-year comic. You could have 3 completely different sets of friend groups over those 20 years. And so you're still writing about Bobby from 20 years ago, even though Bobby hasn't been in your life. Or you also offend Bobby because Bobby didn't ask to be in this comic strip. It's not.
And now Bobby's walked out of your life.
Yeah, Bobby doesn't want that. Or also, it just makes it 1,000% awkward amongst friendships if you're constantly like looking at them and they're like, "Are you writing about me right now?" in the back of your mind. Like we've talked about this in the past. So don't include friendships. Write from passion. And then maybe try to find a new spark that can take you into paths that you really want to write to, even if this business partner doesn't want to go that way. To Brad's point, maybe strike out on your own, and maybe now is the impetus to do it. So that's my brass tacks advice, and maybe Brad.
I think that's good advice. I think it's a possibility. This might be an opportunity.
Yeah, possibility anyway. Just something to consider.
To look at something new,
because it's. We all have the project that we love and we've enjoyed, but it also is a sunk cost fallacy of like, I've been doing this comic for 8 years and it hasn't tricked. So maybe if I make it sci-fi now, it's all the characters we love, but now it's sci-fi. Or it's all the characters we love, but now it's not suitable for work. You get where I'm going with this is that if it wasn't hitting to begin with, putting chocolate sauce on that hamburger is not going to suddenly sell it.
Absolutely.
So anyway, I hope that's helpful to you, Scott, and I hope that's helpful to other people that are listening on that one.
So, Dave, I've got one more question for us to handle yet this week before we can hang up the microphones. And it comes in from Steve Galloway. He's a $5 Patreon backer. And Steve says, I'm looking to launch my webcomic this month and looking to start weekly with the odd time, extra sensitive, time-sensitive strip thrown in. The weekly ones are done for a few months in advance. My plan is to put them up and let WordPress schedule post them so it's more of an automated task. Okay, so there's a lot of words there that says he's got a buffer.
Right. He's got a buffer.
I'm going to skip ahead because there's a lot of stuff here, and I'm getting bogged down.
And he wants to automate it, is what he's saying.
Yes, he's going to automate the posting of his comic. So here's the question. My question is, should I also invest in social media scheduling and automate that side of things as well, or try to tackle social posting manually? My aim is to drop into any interactions on the day of the posting, but I'd rather write out my captions in job lots. What are your thoughts?
Well, I have thought. Wait, what was that last word? Write the captions out in job lots?
Write out my job lots. JOBLOTS, job lots.
That is a phrase. Speaking of my in-laws at the beginning of the show, that is a phrase I've never heard before. Job lots. I'm assuming that means grouping work tasks into one sort of lot of work. I've never heard that.
Yeah,
job
I got
lots.
A miscellaneous collection of goods for sale as a lot, usually to a retailer.
Huh. So basically, they're saying to group up a task, I think. I wonder if that's a non-Americanism. That's job lots. I've never heard that. Sorry. Anyway, I'm sort of one of the things you'll notice on the show is that both Brad and I are fascinated by language because it's good for writing. And so even though it sounds nerdy and incremental at some points to break down these words, it makes you a better writer to figure out all the nuances of language as you do it. So anyway, so to the question. I do see value in breaking up a task and getting it done early, or right. I do see that sort of set it and forget it is a valuable attribute for a lot of things in life. However, my counter argument would be that in the first 6 to 12 months of you doing this, maybe consider doing it in real time. Have them pre-written on some kind of Word document or text edit document, who cares, and then just port it over, because there's something. I don't know how to describe it, but there's something sort of in the trenches about doing it in the time you do it, so that you can see reactions over the first couple minutes in the first hour as you put it up. It also maybe gives you a little more encouragement to see the waters that you're swimming in, because you're more apt to be checking the. I mean, I get it though, from a productivity standpoint. If you're saying, look, I want to avoid social media, it's a time sink, I hate it. So I want to set it and forget it so that I don't waste time every day. I do understand that. But in some ways, I do think there's truth that you want to know the waters that you're swimming in.
Yeah. So there's a couple things. In the past, I've suggested using social media schedulers like later.com for social media scheduling. I would not suggest this for somebody who's just starting out, and I've got two reasons. Number one, although I don't think there's ever going to be any proof or metrics to this, I'm always a little bit worried that a lot of social media sites are going to dampen the effectiveness of a post that comes through a third-party system like Later or Hootsuite or one of these. I'm always worried about those posts getting dampened and not getting as much engagement. They're getting throttled. Okay. Now, Later does a really neat thing in that you're always posting to Instagram in the native format, but it pings your phone and then it copies everything for you. And so you're literally copy and pasting into the Instagram post to make it go out.
But
I always thought that was very sneaky.
You are the sort of the key moment there. I use Later as well. And to Brad's point, it's exactly. It pings you. You are the institutor of the sort of copying and pasting moment. And then you are the one who is formally posting in Instagram. And to Brad's bigger point, that way there's not automation doing it. And no algorithm saying, wait, is this a bot? Nothing like that is triggered. It's like clearly a human coming in, clearly a human pasting in the photos and images and the captions.
I'm a little tin hat about that too. I'm not convinced completely that they don't have some like way of knowing where you were before you came there.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
No, listen, it's funny to use the phrase tin hatism, because I agree with you. We all have those moments where we're like, oh no, they're tracking you. They know where you've been. I know. They're checking you. They know where you're coming from.
But especially when you're just starting out, I would do everything you can, because you're in building mode now. So I would do everything you can just to eliminate those so they don't have you second guessing yourself later on. So that's number one is I don't know that I would be a big fan of that. Number two, since you are in building mode, I wouldn't spend the money on this, right? Most of those apps and so forth are going to cost you a certain amount of money. And until you're at the point where you've got so many social media posts that you just can't keep track of them all. I don't know that. In fact, I've long since stopped using Later. I was on a full year I spent trying to build my presence on Instagram by posting every day. And later.com was a big part of that. It's the only way I could do it. And I wasn't posting every day. I was posting 3 times a day. Pretty much every day. What I found was I've got about the same number of followers on Instagram as I did 2 years ago. It has not moved the needle. I've got the same. It's like 1,500, 1,600. It has been negligible.
Well, can I chime in on that just for a moment? Because a lot of platforms, interestingly, seem to be instituting a sort of algorithm for your overall account usage, where if you post on Instagram stories, if you post on Instagram Live, if you post on Instagram, the regular postings, and if you comment on X number of people that comment on your comic, that seems to be a reward mechanism. Then there's arguments about how much you have to post to each or use to each. But clearly, what they want to do is really embed you in their ecosystem. Like, no, you're going to live and breathe here, and in so doing, then you'll get rewarded. And a part of me is like, that's bullshit. I don't want to live the life. It feels like those YouTubers that constantly have to put up 4 videos a day, or else YouTube negs them for their rankings, right? It's like, well, who are you working for? Are you working for YouTube, or are you working for your career? Are you working for Instagram, or are you trying to build your comics? And so eventually, I continually think this, even though I've gotten Sheldon up to whatever 40,000 on Instagram. At some point, Instagram is going to F me. I know they are.
What do you mean? Wait.
What?
What do you mean at some point? How many people came over from Instagram to your last Kickstarter?
No, exactly. I know. I'm saying that.
What do you mean at some point? Listen, not only are they going to fuck you eventually, they've been worthless since day one. Instagram is a complete worth. The only reason I'm there is sheer habit. It's worthless. It's time that you are. It's more masturbatory than anything I do in After Dark.
You're gonna trigger my asthma, you jerk. That was funny.
Instagram is worthless.
Well, yeah. I mean,
it has no worth.
I definitely feel that way about Facebook. I am not down. I just don't truck with their business practices, and I don't. They revealed their hand with me when it came time to push the Facebook videos and live stuff on Facebook, and how all those numbers were, there's a couple of court cases working their way through right now about how all those numbers were lies. And the number of bots on Instagram is ridiculous. You can tell, you can feel it in the water how many of those accounts are bots. I mean, Twitter's bad, but I feel like Twitter has at least some semblance of real people behind it.
I still get engagement on Twitter. I still see traffic coming from Twitter. Out of all of them, Twitter's I think the best, but then again, it ain't saying much. We're in late stages, not late stages. We're in late stages social media. They've tamped back all this engagement. I've been thinking for a long time, we need to be prepared for the next thing, and that's a topic for another show.
It is a topic for another show. Listen, my short version is, who would have guessed it? Email newsletters, they still work. They still drive traffic.
You're not wrong.
People still read email newsletters, and your website and your newsletters, you own them, you control them. No social media company is going to screw you down the line. Yep. It is still something worth building. Anyway, all of this to say, Brad, I have now completely forgotten what the question was. Can you remind me what our topic was?
Should Steve automate social media?
Wow, I completely forgotten that. Like, had you asked me, it would have been 5 minutes of radio silence. I had so far gone down for where we had started. All right, should you automate? I mean, ultimately, yes. Both Brad and I would say automation. If you can spend an hour to save yourself 5 minutes every day, or 5 minutes in your workflow, we always say with Clip Studio Paint, with Photoshop, with your emailing, with in terms of shortcuts on Google, or the way you post, absolutely yes. You want to try to find efficiencies. What I was saying is, maybe for a while, just get a feel for the waters that is required by manually posting rather than automated posting.
Yeah.
I don't know that I would die on that hill, but I just think that's in general maybe some good advice for the first 6 to 12 months. Brad, wouldn't you say that's a general good advice?
And as far as those job lots go, you can write your posts in advance and put those on a text file somewhere on your phone or whatever. You can still write them in advance. You can still set little reminders on your calendar. I'm gonna part with Dave on this one. I don't think at this stage of the game you should be doing automated social media, mainly because I also want you to be focused in for at least after you post about 15 minutes, so that you can immediately respond to anybody that talks to you at that point, because that's going to really help your engagement. And again, you're in building mode. That's important.
Yeah, and what I was going to say is, to Brad's idea that you just be around for 15 minutes, just find a moment in your day when you're going to have coffee anyway, and you want to sit and take a break. Your drawing hand hurts, so you can just switch back and forth between reading the news and check back on whatever the social media, do a little feedback, and bada bing, bada boom. It basically is serving two masters at one time. But I will say this. the places where I do think that job lots, the new phrase that we've learned this week, where job lots come in handy is Beth and I basically pre-program Patreon at the beginning of the year with all of the giveaways that I do for the 52 weeks. So I draw 52 sketches over Christmas break. And then each week on Patreon, I give away a sketch. And we've talked about this on the show. Patreon does not specifically allow for giveaways, but because I make them public, you do not have to have a paid Patreon account. And so you don't break those 1970s mafia lottery laws by doing it that way. Anyway, long story short, I automate that. I draw them all in over Christmas break. We write one post up with a fun little trivia question for each one. We post them up, and we never think about them for the rest of the year. It's great. It's easy peasy lemon squeezy. So absolutely, with some stuff, you do want a job lot, and you do want to automate it.
Absolutely. But while you're in building mode, just check in with those and do them yourself, at least for the first few weeks, and then see how you feel about it. I don't know that I would suggest somebody just starting out to put money or effort behind a social media schedule.
I was just one final thing, Brad. I just realized that job lot sounds like a Bond villain, doesn't it? No, Mr. Bond, I'm sending in job lot.
He's Oddjob's cousin. He's
Oddjob's
from
thinner brother.
Third twice removed.
Yeah, exactly. Different mother.
Well, speaking of odd jobs, we've done our odd job again for the week by recording ComicLab, and thank you because you've done your odd job in listening to it. ComicLab, the show about making comics and making a living from comics.
Your hosts have been my delightful pal, Brad Geiger, the editor of webcomics.com and the creator of Evil Inc. at evil-comic.com.
And my close personal friend, Dave Kellett, co-director of Stripped and cartoonist of Sheldon at sheldoncomics.com and Drive at drivecomic.com.
And welcoming them onto the show, just a reminder that our sponsor for this week is Bonjoro over at BONJORO.com, and you have the potential for a 20% discount for life with the ComicLab March coupon code. So don't forget that one. And the ComicLab theme song is used with permission from Andy Creighton at theworldrecord.net. And this episode and all episodes was edited by the ever-delightful Matt Woodard of Woodsong Productions over at www.woodsong.media.
If you love ComicLab, you can rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, and you may hear your review featured on a future episode.
And ComicLab is made possible by your support on patreon.com/ComicLab. So we'll go ahead and say that like Emperor Palpatine at that church. Patreon.com/ComicLab.
Peace be with you. And the force be with you.
The force be with you. That actually got me.